stop sharing that book so we can see your face. Congratulations on the book, baby.
Thank
It's out
you.
in the
It's
world.
out.
It's
It's 6 days
there.
old. 6 days.
6 days. How do you feel?
Honestly, I think like I said to you, I'm a little bit poorly. My body's telling me I need to rest, so I'm taking that all in. But honestly, it feels all the messages that I'm getting already, just about how relatable it is and how many people. That was a mission. The mission was to get it out there so people get to understand their patterns, and it seems to be working. And it really hits home.
Oh, I loved it when you said on Instagram. I think you said on the day you said, "I release this to you,
Yeah.
or I release this to anyone who needs it." Just give me goosebumps now. Even I got goosebumps when I read that, and I just think that is for me that is like the ultimate self-help book. It's something that people write for themselves often because they need it, and then
Yeah.
share with others. So
Yeah.
let's go into that then before we, because you've got a great presentation and you're going to talk us through the 7 archetypes
Yeah.
of anxiety archetypes and the 5 steps to kind of calming that inner panic I talked about. But how does somebody come? So you're a psychologist, but how did you become? How did anxiety, and especially high functioning anxiety, become your specialist subject?
So for years and years and years, I was very sort of driven in terms of like I was a very go, go, go individual. But little did I know that behind the scenes it was anxiety. I didn't understand anxiety. I didn't realize that anxiety was this thing that I was feeling all the time. Instead, it was fueling me into just I need to go do the next thing, the next thing, the next thing. And it's only until I started my own journey, my own therapy, that these feelings of like the perfectionist traits within me, but this feeling of I don't feel fulfilled within me. So when I entered my own therapy space, I realized actually all these choices I'm making, all these decisions I'm making, they're very fear-based. And when I started delving in deeper into that, I realized how disconnected I was, mind body was. So I was feeling these feelings, but I didn't actually know that I was feeling anxiety. Instead, it was more like this becomes adrenaline and this becomes your motivation, but it was very fear-based. And that became my journey into understanding and reconnecting back mind body to then step into this authentic way of being where I'm not driven by fear. I'm driven by what's intentional to me. And it's been a real roller coaster of a journey. And it's the more that I've been in this space as well, the more that I'm realizing clients that have been coming to me also going through something very similar. And now it's like I've been through this myself and I want to share this with others that there's another way of being, instead of just doing constantly.
Yeah. I think when we had our intro call, I said to you, so is this book a way to fix anxiety? And I think you said, well, it doesn't, no, it doesn't fix it. It's about how to manage it and also how to use it and understand it and then use it as a superpower. And then depending on your style, your archetype, there are different ways that that can really support you as long as you understand it.
Definitely. I think it's that raising of awareness. The more awareness you have over your patterns, the more that you then can become intentional. But when your patterns are like in the driving seat and they're driving for you, you then don't really understand why you're doing what you're doing. So just
Mm.
having the awareness allows you to be more intentional, more you're directing, you're the one in the driving seat essentially. And yeah, your anxiety might be there in the back seat. You might have other feelings of fear, but that doesn't mean that it's bad. It's almost like that's part of your shadow self and it's trying to tell you that something's not okay here. But rather than just ignoring it or being driven by that, you're sitting with it and you're learning to understand actually what's my fear here telling me? Why is it that my body is reacting in this way where I'm feeling anxiety? I'm noticing that I'm getting this dread in my stomach or my chest is tightening. I'm noticing that my throat is closing up. Like, what is it that's going on here that is making my body do this? And often it comes from other people and what other people might be thinking of you. And you may not even be conscious of this. Like, I don't really care what people think. And it's like, really? So what's going on here in your body that's suggesting something different?
Yeah, our body tells the truth when even when our brain is like, no, I got it. I'm sorted. So just going back to when you talked about you went into therapy and then you kind of learned about anxiety almost in therapy,
Yeah.
especially as it related to you. So obviously that wasn't your specific reason for going. Were you just going to therapy just because you didn't feel good? Like from reading the book, it sounds like anxiety showed up for you as being very high achieving and very good girl
Yeah.
kind of character.
Yeah, so growing up, I was the caretaker. My archetype was the caretaker. So I was one of five, and I was the second oldest. And just growing up, I grew up, my dad was born in India. He came here very young, married my mom very young. And they had children. They weren't very emotionally available in the way that perhaps we needed, but they pushed us from what they didn't get in life. They didn't have that education. So we became like they're giving us this good life to push us and push us. But at the same time, we're taking beliefs that our worth then comes from the achievements. So you're going and going and going and thinking everything's okay because that's all you know until you realize actually I'm on this stage now where the rules of life that I thought were going to make me happy, were going to make me content, that's not giving me what I need. And when you start breaking it down, you start to understand, hang on, it's not your parents' fault. It's things that have gone on in their lives that they're then teaching their kids. And where do we break the cycle? Where do we say enough is enough? And it's time for me to start looking within. So for me, I was growing up in this culture of, okay, right, we need education, we need you to do well, because that's what was in their eyes was good for their kids because they didn't get that and they wanted to give their kids a good life. So all of us were given an opportunity in education. But then I took that on myself where my narrative became my worth is my education, my high achievement. So it's like, what's next? What's next? Because that gave me the love in some ways or the validation of, oh, wow, look at what Lalita's done. Look at what Lalita's done. And it's like, yeah, see, I'm the good girl. But growing up being the good girl means you're also living very externally. You're focused so much on what everyone else wants of you. You're focused on what does everyone else need, and you become hyper vigilant. You become very focused outside in, and you don't really connect with yourself. So you're intellectualizing everything. So when I went into therapy, it was quite a beautiful way of entering because I had to go as part of my course. But at the same time, I was like, there's nothing wrong with me. I don't need to go into therapy. And then I went in and I was like, right, I need to get all these hours for therapy and I need to have this as part of my course. But when I went in there, actually, there was so much shame involved in having therapy because I was like, oh, but no one needs to know that I'm in therapy. It's part of my course. But actually, when I went in, all of these barriers needed to be broken down for me to really get to the core of this shame-based way of presenting myself and going inwards. It's been a really profound journey, and every day it's still unfolding, and you're still learning new things about yourself.
Yeah, I bet. And anyone that says it's not our parents' fault, I think is a sign of someone who's done a lot of work, who's done the work. Because we're like,
Definitely.
we'd love to say it is, but actually,
Yeah.
yeah, that's such a good point.
I think it's understanding their journey as well, isn't it? And making sense of how is it that they're showing up in the world and why is it that they perhaps may be this way. And yeah, just trying to break through their patterns to give yourself that sense of peace as well. Otherwise, we're giving our power away when we're saying, oh, it's their fault, or it's this person's fault, or it's this person's fault. We also need to really hone in on, okay, this has happened in my life, but now what are going to be my next steps in this?
Yeah. And so I'm going to ask you now about the difference between anxiety and high functioning anxiety, which I think is probably on your presentation. So
Yeah.
just before we go into that, my favorite question to ask is, how would you describe your relationship with yourself currently?
Oh, that's a very beautiful question. The first word that comes up for me is compassion, and it's something that I lacked in for years and years and years is self-compassion. I was like, how do I do that? How do I do that? And it's trusting the process in really getting to that place of what does self-compassion mean and understanding yourself more, so you feel grounded within yourself and just connecting back in. So I would say the word that comes up for me is compassion.
Yeah, brilliant. That's a lovely word. And it's something, self-compassion, I think, I'll see a few nods when I say this, is something a lot of us are working on here, aren't we, guys? Yeah. Thank you for sharing that. Okay, shall we go into then, what is high functioning anxiety? And then, yeah, we can look at the archetypes. And David, if you don't mind sharing, guys, I shared in the email today the quiz on Dr. Lalita's website, and there are 7 different archetypes of 7 different anxiety archetypes. So if you've done it, great. Let us know what yours was. If you feel like sharing, if not, then maybe you can have a look at the quiz now. Just as we're going through, it might be quite interesting. I told Dr. Lalita earlier that I haven't done it yet because I was like, it doesn't relate to me because I don't feel like I'm an anxious person. And she said I should do it anyway, which is probably a good point. And my mum did it and she got caretaker, which I think is a common one, but said, but I like being a caretaker. So what's the problem with that? So we'll probably talk about that as we go through.
So shall I share my screen or shall I just first of all just explain about the difference between high functioning anxiety and anxiety?
Yeah, sure. Let's explain.
So the way that I always describe this is a bit like watching or observing a swan. So you see the swan and it's so graceful at the top and it looks like it's so peaceful, but underneath it's sort of flapping away. And it's the same with high functioning anxiety. We come across and we look like we have it all together. We look like we are someone who is very calm, collective, but underneath that's not the case. So we mask to the world that everything's okay, but behind the scenes we may have excessive worrying, we're catastrophizing. And with high functioning anxiety, no one knows that this is what's going on for you. People will see just this one part of you and they don't get to see this part, just like the swan. So that's how I would describe high functioning anxiety. And it's different to anxiety because you're high achieving. You use your anxiety that no one sees. So it doesn't debilitate, it doesn't stop you from doing things. If anything, it fuels you to do more things and just to be this go, 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 the do, rather than the being. So the being is more of like you connecting back into your back into your inward, connecting back inwardly to really show up authentically. Whereas when we're disconnected, we keep showing up as, look, this is who I am. I'm X, Y, and Z. But behind the scenes, that's not who you are. And that disconnection really shows up with loneliness, which at the minute is it's huge. It's a huge epidemic in the world. But it also shows up with disconnection and you not being happy, you not feeling content. So it does have its own mental health issues that come along with that disconnection of self. And that's why I want to really raise this, raise the awareness of what high functioning anxiety is, because people are like, that's not me. And when
Yeah.
you break it down and start to understand, it's like, oh, that's what it is. Like I didn't realize those were the traits of it.
Mm. Yeah, totally. And I do really relate to the idea of feeling lonely because
Yeah,
people don't get you
yeah,
because they're kind of seeing one side of you, which in my case and in lots of people's cases is what you want them to see. So they're not doing anything wrong. They're doing exactly what you want them to do. But actually it's not a nice place to be, is it? When
yeah,
inside that's not you're not feeling as capable or put together
yeah.
or whatever.
And
Yeah.
also, there's something around trust, isn't there? Is like, do I really trust someone to see all parts of me, or can people hold all parts of me? Because maybe we've learned somewhere is I've tried to be emotional, and I know it's been in my journey where I've tried to show emotion. It's like you're too sensitive, or like, and it's like, oh, so you become a little bit more mindful over you having this narrative. I'm not going to share these things with people because they're going to change how they might see me, or they might see me as being more sensitive. Whereas now, if I want to cry, I'll cry in front of people and they might be like, oh my God. And I'm like, yeah, I'm just crying, just feel a little bit sad and that's okay. Whereas once
Yeah.
upon a time, I would never, ever show any sort of emotion.
Yeah, I've shared before with the group how when I started like opening up a bit more to people, some of my really good friends, and they're still really good friends, but they're a bit like, don't know what to do with this because this you've never done this. This is like so it took a while for it to kind of like us to find our kind of like balance, I suppose. But it's worth it. And that's what I always say to people
Yeah.
as well. Sometimes when you kind of like unmask and when you kind of like kind of like what you say like, dig into these layers, sometimes it's not easy to then kind of share that with everybody the first time or the second time, but it's like it's worth it, so keep going. Just because
Yeah.
the first person doesn't react in the perfect way maybe, or someone who's really close to you can't cope with what the new version of you that you're becoming immediately, it's like it's not, please don't stop trying is what I
Yeah.
always would like to say to people.
And sometimes just to add there is like people don't know how to, but we also need to teach people how to because sometimes they may not know what we need. So
Yeah.
for them, someone being emotional might be that they want a hug and maybe you don't want a hug. Maybe you want something different. So I think to develop these deep, meaningful relationships is someone may not get it straight away, but the more that you're vulnerable and you share what might be going on for you and letting people know what you need, that can be really powerful. I know that's been a big thing in my journey is just being open and speaking out and letting people know that this is what I actually need. And
Mm.
actually it has worked in certain relationships, and certain relationships are like, no, 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 this doesn't work for me. And we need to be okay with that as well.
Yeah, sure. And it makes just such great connections when you can actually be vulnerable
Definitely.
with people, doesn't it? It's hard,
Yeah.
but it fosters brilliant connection ultimately. Brilliant. Thank you. Let's share the slides then and show everybody
Okay.
what we're
Let's
talking
go.
about.
So, so just let me know if you can see this.
I can.
Yeah, and I'll put it
Yes.
into
Jen says she can.
okay, so perfect. And let me just make this sort of perfect. So this is the cover of the book, High Functioning Anxiety. So first of all, what is high functioning anxiety? So we've covered a little bit of this. So it's characterized by individuals who outwardly appear to be successful, competent, in control, but internally they experience significant levels of anxiety, stress, and worry, and people don't often see that. It's also characterized by a complex interplay between outward success and internal turmoil. So again, we're showing up as something that's very different to what's really going on inside. And while we may appear accomplished and competent on the surface, we grapple with this overwhelming anxiety and stress beneath the surface. And it's for us to really delve into that, because sometimes we can be rejecting what's underneath the surface as well, because we don't know how to manage it. And that's why where we go into the book, and how the book can help you. So this is the on the back cover of the book, and this is the two sides of high functioning anxiety. And the black is in, it's almost like our shadow part. And I refer to shadow because it's there all the time and it comes out sometimes. And when the sun's out, for example, our shadow, we can see it more often. And that's how our shadow part is it shows up in the world, it's there, but sometimes we don't want to see it. Or it's only until the sun sort of shines on it, we are forced to look at it. So on the one side, we have this one side that we show up in the world, which is organized, we appear calm, we're hardworking, we may meet all the deadlines, we're a high achiever, we're proactive, we're sociable. So that's what people see. But on the other side, we're a perfectionist, we're an excessive worrier, we might feel burnt out, we might feel very over responsible, inadequate, we might procrastinate, and we might feel very lonely. So again, these are sides that people don't really see, but we feel into. And often we don't know how to manage this side. So we just ignore it, keep pushing it, pushing it, pushing it. But the more we push it away, the more disconnected we can feel with ourselves and with people around us.
Yeah, that's a great strategy, isn't it? Until it's not anymore. Just
Yeah, exactly. And it's beautiful, isn't it, that once upon a time we have learned to show up in a way where this has worked for us, but then we hit
Mm,
this brick wall and it's like, this isn't no longer working. These rules aren't working for me. And that's where it's like, okay, what do I now need to do? And I mean, people that come into therapy and they work with me, they're like, I don't know how to. The how to question is, it's something that I just kept hearing over and over again. And I was like, I need to put this into a book, because this is the same process I take people through in the therapy space. So it's beautiful for them to see that there is another way, and the how to get there as well.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
So let's move to the 7 archetypes of high functioning anxiety, which we go through in the book. So number one is the difference between the organizer and the perfectionist. So the organizer is what people see. So people see that you're very organized. You maintain a structured approach to tasks and responsibilities. You prioritize things efficiently, and you're very effective in completing your work. And you balance like attention to detail with the ability to see the bigger picture. So that's what people see of you. But on the other side, we have the perfectionist. And again, people will say to me, but I don't mind being a perfectionist, it's good. But there comes a point where the perfectionist can be very controlled in how you show up day to day. So the
Mm,
perfectionist, and what people don't see, is that you strive for flawlessness in tasks and projects, but that can become exhausting. You often can get caught up in minor details, and that can lead to like delays, or you procrastinating as well for hours. And it's very time consuming. And fears making mistakes or falling short of high standards as well, that can come up for you. So you'll have this constant panic of, what people are going to be thinking of me? I better not make a mistake here. So you're constantly looking at all these different what ifs. So again, doing a simple task can become very exhausting.
yeah. And I think it's interesting as we go through this that even if you aren't this archetype or don't see yourself here, you definitely know people who are, or you work
Yeah.
with people who are. I'm just thinking, I'm not a perfectionist, as people in the group know. And I'm just thinking about some people who've shared in the chat that they are perfectionists. And when I'm working with them or talking to them, I'm like, just post it or just do it. Like, and what's the big deal? Because for me, if there's a spelling mistake, I'll get over it. But now I understand more about for
Yeah.
other people it is a big deal, and it's like, and that would cause them a serious amount of anxiety.
Yeah, people can get stuck in perfectionist space where they feel the need that things have to be perfect, but it all stems from that place of fear of rejection, fear of abandonment, which comes from, what are people going to be thinking if I show up in a certain way, or if there's a spelling mistake, or someone might criticize me. So it's very like fear-based way of presenting.
Yeah, so good to know about other people in our lives and how we can kind of like work with them better and connect with them better.
Yeah. And also, like you just said, is like when people, because I know sometimes I can be very impatient and I'm like, come on, just send me this, just send me this. And then you realize that actually, no, they might be more of a perfectionist, and they might be procrastinating, delaying things, but then they're up till like early hours trying to get things done. So the
Yeah,
fear kicks in, and then their motivation sort of stems, or kicks in, and then they're like, okay, I need to get this done. But it's just a lot of time, constant time. It takes up a lot of time.
yeah, sure.
Okay, so this one, number two, is you appear calm. So on the surface, you feel like people will be like, oh, this person's really calm and collective. So outside, people outwardly, they see you as someone who's very composed, someone who's very peaceful. But again, you're masking that inner turmoil and anxiety with a calm facade. So people don't realize what's going on beneath the surface. And you may suppress emotions or concerns to avoid burdening others because you don't want to come across like you're a burden to others, or you think that, oh, but they've got loads of other things going on. But that's your narrative that you're creating in your head because you see them running around and doing things. But people that will care, that want to be there for you, they may see that, oh, but this person's always calm and collected. They don't need me. So then that becomes the relationship dynamic where people see that you've got it all together. But actually, deep down, there might be a part of you that wants to go to them, but you feel like, but I don't want to be a burden, or I don't want to take up more of their space and time because you may have heard that they're busy or there's something going on for them. And then on the other side, what people don't see is that excessive worrier. So this is where you constantly fret about potential problems or negative outcomes. You overanalyze situations, leading to heightened anxiety. So the overanalysis might be all these what if this happens? What if this happens? What if this
Yeah.
happens? So all these potential situations.
And is
And
that in the future as well as the past? Is this the overthinker as well?
yeah,
Is that,
yeah, yeah,
yeah.
yeah, yeah,
Mm.
yeah, yeah. This is the overthinker, and that's the thing. It's past and the future. So you might be thinking, "Oh, last time I did this with this person, they said this." So say, imagine if you went out somewhere and you wore a dress, a blue dress, and one of your friends said, "Oh, you're wearing that color today." So now in your head, you're thinking, "Okay, I'm going out today, but I better not wear that blue dress because last time I did, that person said this. So now I better go and do this." So it can play out in situations like this where you're just thinking through, oh, maybe I shouldn't wear that because of this now, or this person might say this, or that actually this person's similar. So you're creating these scenarios, but it hasn't happened. So that can feel very exhausting as well. And that's where it can also be a struggle to just relax or switch off because you have these anxious thoughts going on.
Mm-hmm.
Number three is hardworking, and on the other side is burnout. So on one side is people, you demonstrate this dedication, and you're constantly on the top of your game. You're showing up, doing all your tasks, you strive to achieve goals and meet expectations, and you really take pride in your accomplishments. But you may struggle with work-life balance. You might also struggle with compliments when people say nice things to you for your hard work. But on the other side, what people don't see is how burnt out you are. You may feel emotionally and physically exhausted from chronic stress. You may experience a lack of motivation and decreased productivity. And you may suffer from feelings of just this disillusionment towards work where you're just like, oh, do I really want to do this? I don't really want to do this. But no one sees that side because people see that, oh, but they've done this, they've done this, they've done this. So again, we can feel very disconnected from that.
Yeah, this feels like midlife crisis territory a little bit,
Yeah.
where someone's like super successful or do it or seems to be doing very well, and then suddenly crashes and burns or leaves their job, or or you find out that they are miserable. And like you said, all
Yeah.
that kind of disillusionment and lack of motivation is a real surprise to people.
Definitely. And I wonder actually how midlife crisis and high functioning anxiety relates because I feel like people get to a point in life where their rules of life they no longer work and they get burnt out, they're tired, and then they realize, hang on, why am I doing all of this? Why
Yeah.
is this a constant theme in my life where I'm living life, I'm trying to get to this place in work, I'm trying to get this, I'm trying to get this. Like, what is that all about? And I wonder if that's also like a breakthrough where they realize why am I functioning in this way? And where does this functioning come from? Is it from a place of anxiety? But it's only when we get to that place where we're burnt out and our body is not able to, like, we're not able to move forward.
Yeah.
We're compassionately, we're fatigued, we're tired, we're burnt out. And then we get to that place where you have to then go inwards. There's no other way of moving forwards because that rule doesn't work anymore.
Yeah, and like you said, it's like what we've always done, it doesn't work anymore. So
Yeah.
it's like time to, like you say, and then it's time to go inward and look at why we've done it like that for so long, I suppose.
Yeah, it's interesting because you'll try every other thing, but you won't
Yeah,
try therapy. And then eventually you get to that place where it's like, I have to go to therapy now. It's like
yeah,
you avoid it for so long. And that's why I encourage people just to go sooner. Like there doesn't have to be anything essentially like wrong, but it's just sometimes to learn more about your patterns.
yeah. Do it before the midlife crisis, everyone, is our advice. Helen says in the chat, this hit me age 49. I've changed since then. Well done, Helen.
Yeah. Oh, brilliant. And there's a few videos I've put out on TikTok and the number of people, women as well, especially who say these people pleasing habits or this is me being an empath, being the caretaker, being the one who's hardworking. This is me, this is me, this is me. And this is where I'm like, so many people relate to this topic. It's they don't realize there's another way until they realize there's another way.
Yeah, and I love in the book, Lalitaa, how you share kind of almost like it's like you breaking down conversations between you
Yeah.
and clients. It's so good because it's like I think people can really relate to that because it's the kind of thing I imagine lots of people would say in therapy. So it's really good to see that kind of played out.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate that. Number 4 is we show up, we meet all the deadlines, but on the other side, we're over responsible. So when we're talking about meeting all deadlines, you demonstrate your reliability. You always want to show up in a way that, look, I've got this together. You're punctual, you're completing all your tasks, you prioritize time management and organize, you're an organized person to meet deadlines, or you come across like you're organized. You may experience stress or pressure to consistently deliver results. And you might also be someone who on the other side is the over responsible one. So someone who may not have boundaries to say no, you take on excessive responsibilities, often beyond your capacity. You feel compelled to fulfill obligations for fear of letting others down or disappointing others. And you struggle to delegate tasks or ask for help when needed because you feel like you don't want others to think that you can't do this. But the over responsible side can also lead you to having a lack of boundaries, and then you're ending up like feeling like you're drowning, but no one knows, no one can see this because on the other side, it's like I've got everything together.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm sure people relate to that in this chat.
Yeah. Number 5 is the high achiever, and on the other side, we feel inadequate. So the high achiever is someone who sets ambitious goals and strives for excellence, but excellence might be more of what they think they need or more of what society tells them they need rather than what they feel is true to them. You're someone who achieves success and recognition through hard work and determination. You value personal and professional growth, seeking continuous improvement. So again, there's nothing wrong with being a high achiever, but it's at what's going on behind and underneath to fuel that high achieving. So on the other side, we might feel quite inadequate. So we feel unworthy or undeserving of praise or recognition. We engage in negative self-talk and self-doubt about our abilities, and we struggle with imposter syndrome, fearing exposure as a fraud. So we don't want people to see us as we deeply may see ourselves. So we just continue to paddle, pretend everything's fine. Actually, it's not. That's not how we feel. That's not what's going on underneath.
I think this is a bit of my swan, like looking at it.
Yeah. It's
Yeah.
that imposter syndrome, isn't it? Like
Yeah.
people,
Yeah,
yeah, yeah,
definitely. Especially when you're visible, I think, and you're
definitely.
learning as you go, which is kind of the nature of this community and the nature of what we do. So that's great because that's I'm allowed to do that. But I think, when you are trying to, yeah, share as you like learn and share at the same time, sometimes the imposter syndrome is real.
Yeah. It's like having that little voice in that in your head, and because I have it as well where it's there and you're mindful that it's there, but it's also then that's where the compassion comes in and it's like, hang on, you're allowed to be this way, you're allowed to share these things because this is what's going on for you. But I think because for like years, if you're not sharing, it can feel really overwhelming.
Yeah, and thank God you get over your imposter syndrome, so then you can write a book like this, right? And share it with everybody. So
And let everyone know that the imposter syndrome you can learn to manage it so it doesn't stop you from taking opportunities and doing things in life. Like I think that's my biggest thing is when people wake up to realize that actually there is another way and they don't need to let fear control them and stop them and limit them in so many ways. Like I love it when people start to just wake up and realize there's another way.
yeah, lovely.
Number 6, proactive. So what people see is we're very proactive. So we anticipate challenges, take initiative to address them proactively. We plan ahead and set realistic goals to stay ahead of deadlines. We may manage time effectively to maintain productivity and minimize stress. But on the other side, we have the procrastinator. So this is what people don't see. And this is where we delay tasks or decisions, often due to the fear of failure or perfectionism. We engage in avoidance behaviors to cope with anxiety or overwhelm. And then we experience increased stress and guilt as deadlines approach. So there's many people that I know who can procrastinate for days and days, and it's like it will take them 30 minutes to do what they need to do. So why couldn't I just get to this beforehand?
Yeah. Yeah. It's like the feeling of doing it is so much easier than the
Yeah.
3 days of not, of thinking about doing it, but not actually doing it.
And you'll do anything else. You'll go into the dishes, you'll go and clean out the cupboards, you'll go and clean out and do things that you don't even need to do just to get away from it.
Yeah, relate.
Yeah. And number 7 is sociable. So people see you as being sociable. You enjoy socializing and interacting with others in various settings. You exhibit outgoing and friendly behavior, facilitating social connections. You value relationships and foster a sense of community and belonging. But on the other side, what people don't see is the loneliness, is the feeling isolated or disconnected from others despite external interactions. You struggle to develop deep, meaningful connections or relationships, and you experience feelings of emptiness or alienation, even in social settings. So this one comes up a lot where people may feel like, but I am social, I am doing all these things, but on the inside, do they really feel seen and heard in the way that they want? And then this is the 5 things people can do to calm the inner panic and thrive. So the book itself is split into 2 parts, and I've purposely done this because for me it's about also going back to the beginning. So the first part is all about unlearning, and unlearning is about going back to the beginning and breaking down like, hang on, where have I learned these beliefs? Why do I show up the way that I do? And then we can then learn to show up in a different way. And the learning is about, okay, what new strategies can I now take on board to help me move forward? So steps 1 and 2 are unlearning, and steps 3, 4, 5 are relearning.
And I
So
think it's interesting that in the book, unlearning is nearly as much as the learning, because
yeah,
it's like
yeah.
unlearning is a big deal.
It's like people will say, well, I just want to be confident. And it's like, just tell me what I need to do to be confident. And it's like, but sometimes we need to get to the root of where this has come from. Where did we learn that we're not confident? Where did we learn that we're not good enough?
Yeah,
So yeah, really getting to the core of what's going on for me is really important.
yeah, yeah, right.
Yeah. So step 1 is discovering your patterns to unveil your hidden self. So that's all about trying to understand what is this the black part of the 2 sides, like what is this shadow part of you. So when we go deep into that, it's like you're finally looking in the mirror properly. You're finally looking at yourself and looking at all the different parts. So this is taking time to reflect on your behaviors, your thoughts, your emotions. You're identifying the reoccurring patterns or triggers that contribute to the inner panic, and we gain insight into your subconscious beliefs and motivations. So we're really deep diving. I don't shy away. We're just deep diving into this and just understanding where it comes from.
And you share kind of journal prompts and like reflective ideas of how to get to do these things, isn't it? So when we're talking about reflecting on our behaviors, journaling is a great way to do that, because then we can see the patterns. And
Yeah.
um
I've tried to make it into a book where it's a bit like going into therapy and having your therapist there and asking these questions. So just probing questions. So in the journaling, there might be things like, where did this happen? How have you felt like this? Or where was the last time you felt like this? So you're having these discussions, but you're having the space to think about things rather than just reading something and then thinking, oh yeah, yeah, that's me. But it's like you're doing the inner work as well. And I do say in there, like, have a separate like journal where you're just making notes and really taking that space to reflect on what's going on.
Yeah, and I think triggers is such an important word here, isn't it, as well? Because I think sometimes when we feel anxious, we just think, oh, I just feel like that all the time. All the
Yeah.
time. Like
Yeah.
if you're not feeling good and you can't really work out where it's coming from. But actually, when you're actually writing down what's happening, there will be certain moments, certain people, certain places that trigger these feelings. I think
Yeah.
that's so powerful to get that information.
Definitely. And I think like even I think I've shared a few things in chapter 1 about my upbringing and just how sometimes you're thinking that, okay, I'm gonna do this, I'm gonna do this, and you don't really feel anything. When someone compliments you, for example, it's like, oh yeah, I don't really do well with compliments. And so, okay, where has someone complimented you? Where has someone criticized you? So you're trying to break down like, why is it that I present in this way? So having them journal prompts just allows you to go back, but you sometimes don't even realize that this one thing is connected to something that may have happened once upon a time, and we've now created this narrative. That's why I'm like, let's see the big, like, everything, the timeline of what's gone on in your life. I think that's really important, rather
Yeah.
than just trying to move forwards.
Yeah, and learning to take a compliment is so lovely. It's such a nice thing for you, the receiver, and also the giver.
Yeah,
You realize when you actually just say thank you, or take it, and the person giving it to you feels great as well. So
definitely.
that's a lovely thing to
Yeah.
do. Brilliant, thank
And
you.
maybe even just everyone here, like, just notice how you might take compliments, because sometimes if someone says, oh, that's a really nice top that you're wearing, for example, you're like, oh, this old thing, or this is just like really old. And it's like, hang on, what's that about? What happens if we are like, thank you, and we just take that on board? It's just really having that, like, day to day, we can learn so much about ourselves and how we're showing up, what might be going on for ourselves. So just really reflecting on that, I think, can be very powerful.
Yeah, I think that can be our homework, everybody. That's a
Yeah.
nice bit of homework this week. Take a compliment.
And see how it
Give
feels
one
to
and
give a
take one.
compliment, and notice how they accept the compliment as well.
Yes.
And we move to step two. So step two is about decoding your patterns now and uncovering your beliefs. And this is where you face your shadow. So step one was all about just looking and observing. So you're looking in the water, you're observing, oh, look, there's something else going on underneath. And then making sense of it is all about step two. So this is where you explore the underlying beliefs and the assumptions that are driving your patterns. And you also confront the unresolved issues or past traumas contributing to the inner turmoil, and you embrace vulnerability and courageously confront your shadow self. And I've purposely put here courageously because this is something that we know is there, but we're not ready to face. And we keep thinking it's a big thing, it's a big thing. But actually, when we really look at it, it's not as big as we think. And I often hear this in therapy is where people will say, I didn't realize it was just that. Like I always thought it was something bigger. I was always thought that deep down there was something like truly wrong with me until now we're starting to make sense of it. And again, as we mentioned, there's different journal prompts. There's me giving my own personal experiences, giving client experiences, and just giving tasks as well for you to do throughout to help you decode these patterns.
Mm. And I suppose there's no timeline necessarily on these, is there? It's like as long as it takes.
Definitely. Sometimes I pick up the book and I'll just randomly just choose a page and I'm like, oh, okay, I needed to hear that today. So I just feel like we're always work in progress. We can always hear and learn new things. We're never going to get to a place where we are fully self-actualized. That's just something that we're always working to. There's always another learning, and perhaps that's the life experience that we're here to experience.
Mhm.
So number three is all about developing self-connection. So this is really connecting now mind and body together. It's coming out of the intellectualizing and really feeling into your body, and it's facing your fear essentially, not letting your fear take control and understanding where your fear has come from. Because once upon a time you needed the fear there to suppress parts of you down. And often the parts that you suppress down was about your sensitivity and about how you're experiencing emotions. So now when you're feeling emotions, you may not know that you're feeling certain things. So this is where step three, we start to relearn now. How do I tune into that self-connection, into my mind-body connection that's going on there? And this is where we do develop a deeper connection with your inner self through mindfulness or meditation. And that's where we slow, we pause, we connect in, and we practice self-awareness and non-judgmental observation of thoughts and feelings. And we start to challenge these fear-based narratives and cultivate a sense of inner peace and security. So this is really now starting to step into that territory of how do I now show up? If I'm not allowing myself to show up with that, how do I move forward now? So this is the how-to bit.
Yeah, and I'm at the very beginning of the talk. You went like this on your chest, and you said, like, how is it showing up for you, like
Yeah.
physically, like physiologically? How is anxiety or the feeling of stress or whatever it is however it's manifesting? And I think because we've been talking to lots of therapists this month and last month, a lot of like nervous system stuff's coming up and like feeling in your body and yeah, understanding and just letting that pass through. So letting those emotions and those feelings, like literally feeling them.
Yeah, definitely. It's like feeling into you. It sounds really simple, but it's actually something that so many of us that don't do. Like we shallow breathe, we're not really feeling in. We're so like go, go, go. We wake up, pick up the phone, on to the next thing, next thing. Like where do we just stop and pause and really tune in? And that's what this whole journey is about, is coming back into the body. And because there's so much going on up here, the overthinking, the rumination, the catastrophizing, but then that is having an impact on your nervous system without you even realizing. So when you start to become aware of all of this, you then start to be like, okay, I can step into a different territory.
Yeah.
So step four. So this is, and for me, the root of everything that the book is about self-trust. And self-trust is about coming back inwards and you connecting back into your intuition, into your gut feeling that we have once upon a time disconnected from. And it's also learning to embrace your sensitivity. And people be like, I'm not sensitive. I'm like, we're all sensitive. We all have senses that we connect with to the world around us to help us feel and engage with the world and also to engage with people. So you might be someone who's sensitive around certain people. So when you see someone, you already know that when you've asked them, "Hi, how are you?" and they're like, "Yeah, I'm fine," you know they're not fine. You've already felt something completely different because you are more of an empath, but you may have suppressed that. And when you've gone and had that conversation once upon a time, said, "Hi, how are you?" and they're like, "Yeah, I'm fine," you may have personalized that and thought, "Oh God, I've done something wrong." But when you really truly step into this embracing of your sensitivity, you realize, hang on, I'm feeling something into what's going on here for this person. And that's about you then connecting. How do I then manage that? So you're not then personalizing and then or being over responsible or trying to then make it all better for them and fix it for them, because they don't may not need fixing. They may just need, actually, are you sure you're okay? Because you're coming across that you've just said something and this is what's happened. So you're then showing up in a different way where you're honoring your sensitivity. And actually, it says there is honor your sensitivity as a strength and a source of intuition, and
Mm.
trust your instincts and your inner guidance, even in the face of uncertainty. And this also then helps you to set healthy boundaries and prioritize self-care to nurture your emotional well-being.
Mm. I love that. Embrace your sensitivity. Yeah. Don't fight it.
Yeah. And it's not a bad thing. It's not a weakness. The amount of people that I have this conversation with, I'm like, it's not a weakness. It's you feeling into what's going on, and actually showing your emotions is not sensitive. It's not a bad thing.
No, if more people were more sensitive, it would be a better world, I think.
Definitely. And number 5 is about unleashing self-compassion, and that's practicing self-compassion by treating yourself with kindness and understanding, and embrace imperfection. Let go of your self-critic and your perfectionism, and just create a supportive inner dialogue and offer yourself grace during challenging times. And part of step 5, which I love, is I introduced 12 powers. So there's 12 powers that you take away during this, which is 12 powers just to help you thrive. And number 1 is practice mindfulness. Number 2 is pay attention to your inner dialogue. Number 3 is let yourself shine. That's something that people struggle with, is be more visible. You don't need to hide away. And it's interesting, I forgot the thing after the 3 there. So maybe this is the most important one that we need to take away from today. Number 4 is direct your energy intentionally. Number 5 is appreciate your true self. Number 6 is notice the stories you tell yourself. Number 7 is set realistic expectations. Number 8 is create gratitude moments. Number 9 is avoid comparing yourself to others. I've missed it there as well. Number 10 is unlock self-trust. Number 11 is live courageously and be vulnerable. And number 12 is practice patience. So did you hear my perfectionist coming out there? It was like, hang on, look what you've missed. You've missed these things out. But actually my intuition is like, hang on, then we may have missed it out, because this is what people really need to hear today.
Yes, I like that. The
Yeah.
reframe.
But this
And
is, I've gone through this in the book and I've broken down how we do each and every one of these things. But if honestly, if we take these things away in our everyday life, it really allows us to show up in a very different way, because they become powers in how we're showing up. And we allow ourselves to just stay in our power rather than just giving it out to everyone else when we compare ourselves with others, or when we create a story that's not real.
mm, and these 12 powers, would you say they're relevant to whatever archetype you are, and also they're just great ways to look after your mental health generally, I think, aren't they, as well?
Definitely. And I think it's also about how do, like, for example, practice mindfulness. What does that even mean? So people might think, oh, but being mindful means that I need to sit and listen to music and not do anything and just sit there for an hour. And it's like, no, mindfulness can mean whilst you're making a cup of tea, you haven't got your phone, you haven't got music, you're just being mindful and connecting with your senses. That could be a mindfulness technique for you. So everyone is so different in how they show up. And it's not, again, comparing yourself to someone else and thinking, hang on, but they're doing this for mindfulness. They're spending an hour mindfully reading something or listening to music. I should be doing that. It's like, no, you need to find what works for you. And we also go through seasons, just like we go through summer, spring, we go through autumn. It's like we might also go through seasons with, actually, I need more of this now, or I need more of this. So that might also be transforming. So don't think just because this is what I need to be doing and this has worked for me, that's always going to work for me. It's not,
Mm,
because we're always changing, we're always adapting.
yeah. Guys, I'd love you to share in the chat, if you feel brave enough, which of these 12 speaks to you the most right now, whether that's either because it's something that you cannot imagine doing and there's big resistance, or because it's something you're working on currently. And then if you have any more questions, then drop them in the chat, because we'll soon be on to our Q&A session. Can I just ask, Lalitaa, what would unlocking self-trust look like?
That's again connecting back inwards. So when we talk about unlocking self-trust, it's like, okay, I'm feeling into something. So again, the example I just shared about, you've said to someone, hi, how are you? And they're like, yeah, I'm fine. And then you know that something's not fine. It's trusting into that feeling that's going on, because that's you learning to trust yourself. And then you might then say, are you sure everything's okay? Because I noticed this, this, this. And they might turn and be like, yeah, everything's fine. And then it's you trusting, okay, they've just shared that. can feel something isn't, but I'm trusting that whatever I'm feeling right now, it's not something that isn't right, but I'm just sitting with that still, that this is what's happening. So you're not then dismissing and going with whatever the person has said because you're disconnecting from whatever might be going on for you.
I love that. And I know, and there's lots of, in your work, there's lots of kind of intuition and connecting with self, connecting with others. So a lot of it's quite spiritual, I think, isn't it, as well? In the and I can appreciate when people come to you, they're just like, how do I do this? Give me some homework and tell me how to do it. And you have written a whole book about it, but in the book you are also saying sometimes it's just learning to be, and
Yeah.
sometimes it's learning to just be yourself and making peace with that. Is that
Definitely.
fair?
And I think this is like, I think the next chapter or the next sort of stage for you after you're really connecting authentically is you connecting more with your purpose, with you connecting more with actually what is it that I'm about? Who am I? What am I? So you're really learning more about yourself to then how do I want to show up? What are my values? And when you
Mm,
do that, you start to go inwards and make sense of things. And I do feel like a lot of us that are empaths, a lot of us that are people that are the caretakers, there's a lot more going on there for us in how we show up and how we hold our light to help others and support others because we do want to do that. But it's like, okay, how do I now show up doing that without stepping on myself or without ignoring my own needs? Because that's also important as well, is looking after yourself.
mm, absolutely. There's lots of threes in the chat, so maybe let's just touch on that. So a lot of people are saying three is something they're working on or like to
Oh,
work
see,
on.
it was meant to be.
Someone's even used the word pipsqueak. I've turned into a pipsqueak. How do we let ourselves shine?
This has been probably one of my biggest my own through my own experiences is how do you allow yourself to be so vulnerable and to allow yourself to be visible? Because on the one hand, you want to be visible, but on the other hand, it's like, no, you can't do it that way. You can't be this. So letting yourself shine is about you being different. And we're in a society where everyone also wants to be the same as everyone else. So, and this person's done this, so I should be doing this. Letting yourself shine is you staying in your lane, you understanding what's important in your lane and sticking to that rather than thinking that person's doing this or that person's doing this. But also, if, for example, like I mentioned right at the beginning of this, is if I want to cry, I might cry. And I'm no longer ashamed of that, or will shut myself down and think, oh, better not, because that person's just reacted like I've just seen their facial expression and it's uncomfortable for them. So I'm going to stop myself now from doing this. It's like, no, if I want to cry, I'm going to cry. And if this person's uncomfortable, let's talk about it. Let's discuss it. Like, does this upset you? Does this make you feel uncomfortable rather than me tuning away from that and not allowing yourself to really shine as you're meant to?
I love that. Yeah. So the key word there is yourself. Like it's being yourself, isn't it? So
Yeah.
whether that is you being more emotional, or you being more compassionate, or you reading self-help and wanting to share it on
Yeah.
Instagram or
Yeah.
with your friends and family, which I think is an excellent way to do it. But yeah, I love that. So yes, hopefully anyone that put three in the chat can maybe work on that this week as well. And somebody's mentioned that we did a book, Lita, called Tiny Habits,
Oh,
by BJ Fogg, and he always talked about doing a tiny habit and then celebrating, and he called that feeling shine, that kind of feeling of like when you've achieved something and kind of like, yeah, I think it's such a lovely word.
and it's
um
embracing your individuality. It's like, why are we dimming ourselves down? Because we notice that other people are uncomfortable. And that's perhaps a learned
yeah,
way of being is dim yourself, make everyone else comfortable. Because by making everyone else uncomfortable, essentially you were keeping yourself safe and secure in so many ways. But now it's like that's no longer working for you, and you're not here to again dim yourself down. You're here to just shine. And that's one of my biggest things is don't dim yourself for
mm,
others. It's like allow yourself to really shine as you're meant to.
yeah, I love it. And I'm just going to reference one other book that we've done a session with recently, Susie Ashworth, who wrote a book called Infinite
Oh,
Receiving.
she's brilliant.
You know
Yeah.
Susie?
Yeah,
Oh,
yeah. She's
she's
a good
brilliant, isn't
friend.
she?
Yeah.
And she talks about in her book some of her pillars, and one of them is a pillar of greatness. And the
Yeah.
question is, when was the last time you were great? And I was a bit like, oh, well, that feels a bit like saying I was great. That, and then I then kind of reframed it, and I was like, who else do I think's great? I don't
Yeah.
know, like Oprah, Susie, you. Like it's like when you're thinking about people, and you're like, if they didn't do great things, we would be the world would be like it'd be less shiny, wouldn't it? So it's like
Yeah.
channeling those people, and it's okay to want to be great at something, and it's okay if we don't get there, fine. But it's like, I think it's yeah, interesting to like we talk about language, isn't it, and kind of what shine means to different people.
Yeah, and it's this courageousness within us as well. Like we
Yeah.
we know we want to shine, but sometimes it's the courage, because if we shine, it's like, oh God, what are people going to be thinking about us? Like if you were to say, yeah, yeah, I'm great, it's like, oh God, but if I say that, what are people going to think of me? Like if I start to, it's again, there's this feeling of because I know I struggled with that, is I don't want to come across like I'm stuck up, or I don't want to come across like I'm taking up space, or I'm taking up someone else's shine, and it's like I'll just stay in this space, but actually there's enough space for us all to shine in our own unique ways, and that's
Yeah.
something for us to really take on board as well.
Yeah, I love it. Was it Snoop Dogg that did the thank you speech to himself when he won an
Yeah,
award?
yeah.
And it's like, yes, let's all be a bit more Snoop. I'd like to thank myself and myself for working so hard. Brilliant.
Brilliant. I can see that as a reel coming up.
Yeah. So I've got some questions. If anyone has any questions please put them in the chat because we're running low on time. Um, anything else you'd like to add, Dr. Lalitaa, before we go into question time?
No, that's it. So there was thank you, and then there was this archetype quiz, but we've already shared that, and that's it. So shall I end this?
Yeah, brilliant. And then we can see more of you. Lovely. Thank
Perfect.
you. Yeah, guys, if you have any questions, put them in the chat. I know we've been doing them as we go. One question that we had from somebody who can't be here tonight was about because I shared the 7 archetypes in the email today, was about ADHD and ADHD versus high functioning anxiety, I suppose,
Yeah.
because she's been diagnosed with ADHD as an adult, and says of the 7 archetypes, a lot of those characteristics are very similar to what people would say is ADHD traits. So I just wondered what you think of if there's any correlation and what you
Yeah,
think
no,
about that.
there is. There's a lot of crossover with ADHD, but it's just it can be like the inattentive ADHD. So there's different types of ADHD that you can get. But also with high functioning anxiety, those individuals who may not get a diagnosis, they're like, okay, I don't understand, why do I keep presenting in this way? And often this is where high functioning anxiety really fits them, because they're like, I get it. I get why my brain works in the way that it does, and I might be more of a perfectionist, I might be more of a people pleaser. But there's so many crossovers with lots of different diagnoses. And when you go through a different process of a diagnosis, sometimes, yeah, it's like there's different traits there. But like, for example, anxiety, someone might say, yeah, yeah, but I'm not anxious. But when you break down what anxiety means day to day, people are, it's like, ah, okay, that's my anxiety. That's me feeling. But with ADHD and with high functioning anxiety, there are certain crossovers in how we may present ourselves. But often it's if it then impacts on our daily life, or if, for example, we feel like actually there's other things that might be going on, because with ADHD, there's a lot of research around is it that we're born in with the way that our brain works, or is there a trauma attached to it? So there's still a lot of research. We're in the early years of that. So it's still, yeah, there's a lot of overlap. And I think there's still a lot of research to do with that, but there's a lot of crossovers with high functioning anxiety and ADHD.
Hmm. And someone's actually asked about PTSD as well in the chat.
Yeah, yeah. So again, PTSD. When we think of PTSD, though, sometimes we can get flashbacks, we can get nightmares, and there's other things that may have happened from an earlier trauma, but it's not just always an earlier trauma. It might also be another trauma that's happened in our adolescence or our adulthood. So that might be slightly different to how we show up with high functioning anxiety. High functioning anxiety is more of a learned way of being in the world. And it's not a diagnosis. So you can't have a diagnosis for high functioning anxiety. So it's like that part where just before we get to a point where we are burnt out, we're exhausted, we're tired, it doesn't stop us in some ways from showing up as being this high achiever. Whereas PTSD, it can stop us. It can mean that it does impact on our daily life in sort of really difficult ways. So that's where we may need certain support to help us work through the trauma, because it will impact on our memory and our brain in a different way.
Sure. Yeah, I like that way of describing it. That made sense to me. It's high functioning anxiety is a way of being. So
Yeah.
yeah, so how you kind of like how you show up.
Or a
Uh,
learned way of doing. And what we're
yeah.
trying to do is step into the being.
Yes, sure. So learned way of doing, and we need more being. A question from Steph. Thoughts on high functioning anxiety and the crossover with self-worth?
Oh, I think it comes the root of it. The root of it is that we don't feel enough. We don't feel that we don't feel like we trust our inner self, because we've learned to live outside in. So when we're living outside in, we are tuned out from what we're feeling, what's going on within us. And we're so focused on this person wants this, or this person's looking like this, or this person might need this from us. So we learn to understand other people. And it might not be that we actually understand people. We've just learned through our experiences that when someone does this, it means that they're upset. And it might not mean that they are upset, but that becomes our narrative, because we feel dysregulated in someone else showing up in a certain way. When we're dysregulated, again, it's our nervous system that is like panic, panic, panic. And we then feel the need to fix, that we feel the need to become over responsible, because as soon as we do that, it's like, oh, okay, I can calm now. The person's okay. So we learn to really connect and tune in outside in. But what we do when we start to delve into high functioning anxiety is work on our self-worth, because we realize we are enough, we can shine as we are we're okay to be grounded, and tuning inwards to start to understand how your body works to then show up as I am enough.
So is the goal to kind of get rid of our anxiety, or the goal is to feel calmer more, is it?
Yeah, so the anxiety is a result of us trying to strive for something and
Yeah.
getting something. And if we don't get it, the anxiety sort of kicks in to reinforce, well, like, I need this, I need this. But we're learning that I need this in order to fulfill the inner void that we have of I'm not enough. So we keep trying to fill this, fill this, fill this with things that we think people want from us. But that filling isn't actually intentional. It's something that we've learned to do over time. So this goes back into our like childhood. It goes back into us understanding, okay, if mom, for example, she would like be upset with me if I came home and I showed her something. What does that mean? That means that I need to prove to mom that I'm enough. So to prove to mom I'm enough, I need to now do X, Y, and Z. And that becomes our way of being in the world, where we feel like I need to do and I need to be a certain way, because if I'm not, then it means that I'm not enough. So we've learned to be enough from what people think of us, rather than being enough based on what we feel we are.
So the goal is to be able to feel we are enough and just to
Yeah.
accept and understand ourselves like that.
Otherwise, we're just like constantly striving to try and be enough. And it's like we are enough as we are, but we just don't know it, because
Yeah.
we haven't learned to feel into that. We've learned, no, 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 you don't upset people. You need to give people what they need. And what you're really doing is, it's okay for people to feel uncomfortable, but having conversations about it. Like if you notice someone isn't okay, have us open, start a dialogue of like, is everything okay? But once upon a time, that would be, you weren't able to have that dialogue with your family or your attachments or your parents, because growing up it was like, no, 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 you don't talk about this, because if your parents were emotionally unavailable, how could you then openly ask like, but mom, I've said this to you and you've gone really quiet, and when you've gone quiet it makes me feel like I've done something wrong, and when I
Mm.
feel like I've done something wrong, I feel like now I need to overgive and make sure that you're okay, and when you act different, then I feel like, oh, okay, I'm okay now. So we don't have the awareness back then, but also your parents may not have the awareness. So you learn, ignore my emotions, ignore my sensitivity, and keep showing up as making sure mom's okay, making sure mom's okay. And then you continue doing that with everyone else around you, because the attachments that we have, they become how we relate to people in the world.
Sure. Wow, brilliant. I think that's a great place to end. Thank you so much. It's been so useful and so much information. Thank you guys for being very open and sharing and giving us some good answers. Yeah, thank you, Dr. Lalitaa. It's been wonderful to meet you. Thank you for the book.
Thank you. Thank you. I appreciate it. And if anyone has any questions, please feel free. Just send me a message. I'm always happy